James, it's actually good to see you.
And you too, Livy.
You and I work together, research together. Our buildings at the university are only a building apart, and yet we probably talk almost every day on research things, but we don't actually see each other that much. So we're really living the modern distributed workplace ourselves. But I want to start with your office because while I'm no tech geek to the level you are, I do have some geeky children in terms of tech. But yeah, walk us through your office and how that acts as a scaffold, because I talk about that in terms of creating an environment that is meaningful for you in the work you do.
So I think behind me you can see some of my muses.
Yes.
So
Tell
one
us
of them
about your.
there. So I've got a game box there from 1980. I think it's 1986 actually, which is one of the gold box editions of Dungeons and Dragons. So I think if you can get any geekier than Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not sure.
Love it.
And I'm pretty sure that the discs inside. So we're talking discs here, floppy disks
Wow.
are the old 5 1/4 ones. So we're talking 1980s high technology here.
How cool.
And I'm pretty sure I played it on a IBM XT. So again, we're talking the heights of early 1980s computing technology, where I think my father brought a computer home and said, son, I think you might want to learn about this thing. And I think he had some good foresight, what is it, nearly 40 odd years ago or 45 years ago, to say, how about starting to learn about computing, and not just learning about computing from just using it, but actually learning about the foundations of programming, learning about the foundations of how computers work. And I guess that then took me on my journey. So I guess for me, it was gaming led me to my journey of being an associate professor in computer games, but then linking that then to the work that I do with yourself and others in using games technology.
Yeah, which I absolutely love it. So we're going to get into that, and also the workplace, where that's heading, AI, all of the questions that everybody has around that. But one of the narratives that we often chat about is this, the bashing of the gaming, and that technology is the end of times and all those sorts of things. So I'd love to hear a little bit about. I think you may want to share it, that you grew up
Yeah.
playing a lot of gaming, even into your 20s, before you did a PhD in AI, before everyone even knew what that was, software engineering. So tell us about the love of gaming, and how that ended up, and obviously why you think it's actually a great thing.
So I think I mentioned just a little bit before that, yeah, dad got this computer. So
And were you an Atari? Was it that early? Or
this was in the Atari era, but I was the only one to have an IBM computer. So this is like the early days. We're talking computers even then were, like $6,000. So not everyone had access to this. Dad was an electrical engineer and he worked for telecom, so Telstra, and he worked in the big, essentially their big data centers. So
wow.
we're talking the early days here, but it was quite interesting that he worked with systems analysts and computer programmers who used to program in like binary code, and he could see that foresight. And I think that then led me to through the love of games. So my real experience with using the computer was, of course, not programming or anything like that in the beginning, because I was only 4 years old, but it was really around the love of sort of that entertainment, but what can this thing do? And I think gaming is so interesting because it really is the height of the power of what computer can do, because it integrates everything from artificial intelligence to storytelling to music to graphics to vision to immersion. And so when one thinks about games, you really think about the bleeding edge of technology. And I think that's what really hooked me. Yes, games were fun, and yes, I played many games over my years, including during my PhD, where I think I was accused more of doing a PhD in games playing rather than actually doing the PhD. Although my rebuttal to that was I would automate my algorithmic processes on the supercomputer, and I did it deliberately so that I could play more games.
Oh, awesome. I love
rather
it.
rather than sitting there and running tests, I would
And this is
automate
a
the
few,
tests.
and that's what, more than 20 odd years ago when you were doing your
It's a little
PhD.
while ago. Yeah, it's a little while ago.
So you were adopt what everyone's trying to do now is figure out how to have an agentic version of themselves or automate their work. You were doing it 20 years ago.
Absolutely. And I did it both through work. So I worked for Compact Research and Development, building automated test systems for compact computers in a research sort of setting. And then I then used that experience to automate my PhD side of things. So I would run thousands of experiments or test cases over weekends and other things on the supercomputer so that I didn't have to be there to monitor it. And if it failed, I was building fail safe recovery systems when I was at Compaq. And then I was able to bring that again into this so that if it failed, it would learn from that, then it would reboot the whole system and then start again. And so I sort of took a lot of that knowledge and applied it into the PhD again, because for me, I wanted to make my work time exciting and fun, be that playing games or maybe a few drinks at the pub or something like that. But it was interesting because I think a lot of people, they want to explore and do this. And I think that a lot of the systems that are emerging now are enabling us to do a lot of process optimization, optimizing the way that we work. But I think you really need to have a good understanding of what's happening behind the scenes in order to get the best out of those particular systems. And it's not just blindly using them, but rather really thinking about why I'm doing it, how can I use it, how can I optimize from that process, and how can my work environment augment and work around me to enable me to optimize my processes.
Mm. I want to get more into that, but I just want to pick up a little bit more on the gaming
Yep.
side. And people might be thinking, and we read this all the time in the media, oh, what a waste of time. What a waste of your life. You're sitting there. And I think you and I have chatted that sometimes you were gaming. I don't know if I'm letting the cat out of the bag, maybe 10, 12 hours a day, a lot of time, maybe more.
That's conservative.
Okay. A lot of time. James wasn't sleeping. But you talked about a lot of the benefits of games, and there are a lot of studies that show this in all kinds of areas in terms of cognition, but creativity. But for you, I'd love to hear, did that actually enhance your thinking and experimentation during the PhD? And what were and are the benefits of gaming for you? Because I really feel like this is a narrative that we'll pick up later on in terms of the workplace. But I'd love to hear.
I think from my perspective, it enables you to experiment and to work through different solutions and different approaches to solving a problem. And so I think that in itself lends itself very well to what I was doing in the PhD around looking for different solutions. Now, I was doing that programmatically, so writing code to change itself and change the parameters based off what was happening. But gaming in a way does that because you have NPCs, you have non-playing characters, you have playing characters, and being able to be immersed in an environment where you can learn the algorithm, but then the algorithm can change depending upon the situation, or you then add in the human, which then really changes the algorithm because they behave in, well, they behave in patterns. Let you know that, and I think that's a fun way of thinking about things because you can learn the patterns of play. And then you can use that to your advantage. And so when I was playing World of Warcraft in the sort of early seasons, I used to play the arena, which is essentially like early esports. And so it was competitive, and so I would play that with a mate. who was also doing his PhD. And we were, I think, number one in Oceania for playing this particular arena setup of World of Warcraft. And so we found it quite exciting to learn the patterns and learn the play, and then use that to our advantage to win the tournament structures, and then sort of level ourselves up from that to then say, well, for the next season, what can we do better and how can we improve on that? And we were never the greatest sort of geared up characters, but it was our ability to use strategy and to learn from the play that actually put us at an advantage compared to others that may have better items or gear or whatever it happened to be. But because we worked on strategy and the algorithm, so to speak, we could essentially enhance ourselves beyond maybe others who were just relying upon what gear they had, or just sort of the amount of hours that they were playing. So I guess we were doing the early stages of sports science and sports technology integrated into the gaming environment to enhance our productivity, which was to win games.
Mm.
So I mean, so you can see I was actually more excited about that in a way than actually playing the arena battles. So I think there's the fun, and there's the entertainment, and there's the sort of the adrenaline and all of those things that come with it. But for me, it was more the learning and the application, more of the geeky, nerdy stuff that made me
Totally.
really go, oh, that's really exciting and fun, to almost in a way learn the system and go beyond the system. And I think gamers are really good at it, especially really good gamers. And I think that's sort of alluding to that idea that we have millions of gamers around the world that are learning to do exactly that type of strategic thinking, especially when they play multiplayer games. So a lot of narrative single player games, you probably don't get that, but it's more in that multiplayer environment where you're playing against both humans and AI NPCs, that you start to learn strategy, you start to adopt strategy, you start to break strategy, you start to do pattern analysis, but then break away from that to find where the little niches are that you can become more productive. And so I think gamers are extremely good at breaking the system and optimizing the process or the work, or in this case, the game, to their advantage. They're also really good at being able to lead teams. They're good at being able to sort of understand project management and all of these different sort of soft skills that we kind of take for granted. But in a way, gaming enables them to do that, but also do that over multiple iterations. And so they become quite experienced very quickly. And if you think about team management, project management, doing work and learning from work and communicating and understanding technical platforms, be it Discord or whatever it happens to be, gamers are coming to the workforce in a way highly advanced, but the workforce itself is probably not geared up to be able to take advantage of all of those skill sets. They possibly look at gaming as, kids playing and not thinking about the real strategy behind it. Now, there is certain organizations that do, and there's certain organizations that take real advantage of the ability to, illustrate leadership, to be able to solve problems, be able to execute outcomes, be able to optimize the way that you go through those processes. We see that a lot in the military. We see that a lot in, I saw recently that groups like ASIO and others are adopting game strategies and actively seeking individuals that game, because you can utilize those skill sets in the work environment. But probably we haven't seen it so much in the corporate enterprise as yet. And so I think that there's some real capacity building that can happen within the corporate enterprise to integrate some of those key foundational skills that gaming can provide. So
Definitely.
hopefully that gives a bit
100%.
of an idea of the sort of the gaming and
Yeah.
and that
Permission
business side.
permission
Yeah.
granted, everyone, in terms of actually this is something we all should be doing more of by the sound of it. But
Oh,
as you talked
absolutely. It's
about,
also good for your brain. I think that's the other
right,
thing
instead of
as
people
well.
saying the
So
opposite. So
yes,
strategic thinking you talked about,
yeah,
obviously, and if we're looking at the changing landscape of business and work, that's always been critical, but more so. But two things you talked about: pattern recognition and foresight. And those, I think, are two of the most critical skills that we're going to need going forward,
yes.
because, AI is not good at having foresight, right, at this point in time. And
But
so
it's great at pattern
it's
recognition.
great at
And
pattern recognition, but
yeah.
humans, it's a skill I think that is really essential in the workforce.
Definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about then, because I know I've had some questions already when I've mentioned you're coming on as a guest, about AI generally, and then I want to talk more specifically about the workplace. So, on the one hand, we've got the fear narrative, the Elon, we're going to have to move to Mars. We're going to be taken over on Earth. We've had the stories in the media this year of the AI manipulating its users when instead of shutting itself down. You're someone who's been around this for as long as pretty much anyone else, as we said, in doing your PhD 20 years ago in this space. So what's your summary take? Are we going to Mars? What are the issues? What are the opportunities? Where are we at as a race?
I don't think we're going to Mars.
I hope not. I don't want to go to Mars. I definitely don't want to go to
I
Mars.
don't think that's going to happen. I think we're at a really exciting time, but a disruptive time. So I think that we are trying to determine what AI can do for business. And obviously, it can do a lot for different scales of business. And I think whether you're a large scale enterprise versus a small business, it can be used, but it has to be used differently. And I think it's about it's about inward thinking about the business and reflecting on what the business does. I think we see that even in things like higher education and others where they're saying, what is the value of higher education? What is the value of knowledge work?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happened is that a lot of the knowledge work has been essentially produce item X, put item X on a
PowerPoint.
dashboard,
Yeah.
yeah, or a PowerPoint, and then present to item X. And so I think that a lot of people are thinking, oh, wow, that's what my job is.
Mm.
It's essentially doing that.
Producing
And computers
reports.
can do that way faster
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
way better.
Mm.
And to be honest, I look at that and go, wow, if that's your job, oh, that's the most boring job I've ever heard of. Sorry to anyone out there whose job is that, by the
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at that and go, wow, optimize that, get rid of that. That is like
Mm-hmm.
the worst thing for us to be thinking about as work and
Mm-hmm.
as using our minds and our humanity to sit there and put out little pieces of paper
Mm-hmm.
or digital bytes and bits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that work itself has to really reimagine itself, and I think it will. And I think that it will happen economically in the beginning, where, unfortunately, I think we will see large scale job losses because the jobs themselves have not been rethought yet. That they are very much around essentially what a computer can do,
Mm-hmm.
and it will change, and it will sort of rebound very quickly, I think, because what a computer can do and what humans can do and what work really is, I think that will change quite rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that AI systems and things have their flaws, just like any computing-based system can have its flaws. And we just learn to adapt based off what we have available to us, whether it was a hammer, whether it was a chisel, whether it's an artificial intelligent data center that lets
Mm-hmm.
us solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it will take time. And just like any revolution, there's always, unfortunately, sort of some aspect of redundancy. There's some aspect of process optimization. It's kind of a better way of saying redundancy, but
Mm.
essentially that happens.
Hmm.
And so I do think that we're going to see a bit of that, but the economy, the workforce adapts so quickly to things because people want to make money. Making money is a good thing. It enables so much to happen, and if
Mm.
everyone's successful, that's a real positive. And I think that's what people want to see. Um, and we can see that a number of organizations are investing extreme amounts of money. They just had that round table the other day where I think it was nearly $2 trillion being sort of spruiked around new data centers in the US, around, US AI sovereignty, about, integrating of the power system into the AI system, because of course it uses a lot of power to produce these things. And so we're also seeing exactly the same thing happening in the Middle East. We're seeing the same thing happen in China. I know that Australia at the recent economic roundtable brought AI up to the forefront, that we also have to do the same thing here. And I've been calling that out for at least 10 years.
You have,
so,
yeah. Hmm.
so I think that we're a little bit behind there, listeners. And I think that we really do need to push that very quickly,
Mm.
because I think that AI sovereignty for a country is very important, and having models that reflect your values is really important. Um, I also think that there will be a lot more integration of things like privacy and ethics and doing these things, but at the end of the day, it will come down to economics. And
Mm.
I think that we need to have conversations around privacy and ethics as economics, that to not do it is not economical. And I
Mm.
think that we need to change our mindsets around that. Um, so look, as I said, I don't think we're moving to Mars, but I think there will be disruption. But I think there will be a lot of positive change that will happen in so many different sectors because of the power and this influx of new processing capacity that will
Mm.
be enabled by these huge investments. I mean, we're talking some of the biggest investments ever in anything being put here. I think they're calling it the new oil, the new gold, the new this sort of thing. But data and data processing has been that for 10, 15 years. It's
Mm.
just that it's starting to hit the mainstream now, that people are saying, "Oh, that seems like something that I should have gotten on the
Got on to
bandwagon with."
the same old story. Yeah, look, I think it's so much we could dive into in that. One thing I'd love to chat about next, though, is in the office. There was a recent survey that showed that workers think that the office is going to be obsolete, not because no one wants to go there, which is a separate conversation, but because of technology and AI. And there's this big conversation about presence and what that means. And obviously, you and I know that just being in the office does not equate to anything beneficial necessarily. Often it's performative. Often people aren't necessarily doing any work, but they're being ticked off because of that idea of FaceTime and all the things that we've talked about from the Henry Ford era. But I think, and this is something obviously that is coming up a lot more so, I think this year, this conversation is, the future is not so much, as you said, people doing PowerPoints, for using AI to do their PowerPoints and so forth, or VR headsets in the office, which is problematic on a whole range of fronts. You can't sit there in a headset all day. But more about this layered presence. So your holographic co-workers, your AI agents, your remote avatars. So explain to us what those things actually mean, and what does it mean to be present, say in an office, when you're in three layers of space at once: physical, digital, and virtual.
So that's a really interesting one. I think I'm going to use myself as an example first, and maybe my example doesn't translate to everybody. But one of my other job roles I have is Associate Dean of External Engagement, and so what I find is that I use the office environment time to actually go and meet people, to talk to them, to work through issues that are really good to do in a human to human sense, where you can kind of let your guard down a bit, and you're talking more in a friendly environment. That may be in the office, it may be out walking around, in my case, a campus. It could be in a park or something else. And you're using the environment in a way to relax you, but you're able to talk about things that you may not do perhaps over a Zoom or in an office-based environment. And so I can see how different types of work can be done in different ways. And for me, like I said, I engage at the office, but then what I end up doing then is I do my process and my work typically either at home, or I come back to my desk and do my focus work, but I do it quite quickly. So I tend to use most of my day to engage with people, and then I do my sort of work focused stuff quite quickly at the end of the day, because I see the value of being at the office is not about doing the process work, it's about actually meeting the people. And so for me, it's rethinking about what is the workplace and why am I even there? And for me, it's about collaboration, it's about presence, it's about friendliness, and actually trying to create a relationship with people. And again, I know my job is such that it is about relationship building, but most jobs are relationship building. Because that then allows you to work on different levels that you can't do without a relationship. And I'm not talking, romantic relationships. I'm just talking about that sort of collegiate work sort of relationships and partnerships, and working on strategic ways of enhancing those. And so I've just essentially changed the way I look at the workday and looking at the environment that I'm in, and just using it in a different approach, really. And that it's quite interesting that focused work is really just a small part of one's day. And I think that is actually where that old model of the Henry Ford thinking, factory worker presses out X number of factory bits or widgets, that is so antiquated and so wrong that it's got nothing to do with that. It's about executing outcome. And if outcome can be executed in 20, 30, 40 minutes, so be it. And that the rest of the time is actually around essentially building up relationships that can strategically optimize the work that you do in those short, sharp bursts. So be it being able to form teams in 20 or 30 seconds or minutes, like, okay, I will contact X, Y, and Z, and because I've built those relationships up, they will execute the outcome very quickly. And that's essentially the way that I've really been thinking about the office place, is more around essentially setting up the chessboard strategically so that work outcomes can be executed very efficiently. And
So
so, yeah, so it's gaming
gaming.
that environment. Um, and so that's kind of the way I've been doing it. Now, I don't know how that works for everybody, but again, it's just about reimagining what is work.
So many things are going to shift around this, as you're saying. But tell us, for those who might be sort of thinking, I'm seeing these words, but I really don't
Yeah.
understand what it means and how it would work for me as a knowledge worker. So, a holographic co-workers and having a remote avatar. What does that mean, and how might that work in this office of the future?
Yeah. Look, I think there's some value and there's some gimmickry. So I think we have to kind of look at what the real value is of those things.
Because
There
what's
is
a
a value.
holographic co-worker? I don't, yeah,
Yeah,
just
imagine you've got like some Star Wars hologram sitting next to
of
you on your
you.
desk. It's
Right.
not, you know, it,
Okay. So
but
I
there is
can
something
pretend
about.
that James is in the office, even though he's not, by having a hologram. Is that really what we're talking about? Not
I
really.
think it's about presence. I think
Okay.
it's about having that sense that you are a community. So I
Mhm.
don't I don't see that as a gimmick. I think having a sense of community in a workplace or a work environment is going back to our biological needs to have
Yeah.
people around
Be in
us
tribes. Yeah.
and be in tribes. And so I think there is a real value to having a visual, because we're very visual biologies
Species. Yeah.
and species. So we are able to have that connection to our co-workers, our people working on this problem, hopefully solving that issue together. And I think when you are a disassociated set of, maybe it's an email address, or maybe it's a voice over IP, or like in the Zoom type kind of concept, that disassociation means that the connection, the bond that is formed between those individuals perhaps isn't as strong biologically as what we would when we have the visual cortex, where we have all of those other mechanisms coming into play. So audio is but one aspect, but vision is probably about 70% of our processing. And so being able to have that is important. Now, someone might say, oh, but what about an image? An image and having dimensionality or space to something is completely different. And I think that ability to have a reasonably high fidelity visualization, but also being able to see someone not in the picture perfect photograph, but actually having someone there as the person. I think there's those flaws and other things that we see in real life, that it creates a humanity, that they're not just this digital robot or avatar that I just send things to in a distant universe somewhere, and those
Absolutely.
things get done. And I think that's in a way where AI has lost out a little bit, is that it is kind of that impersonal bot that kind of does work product optimization for me, but it's not a thing. It's not, well, although there is issues around people becoming attached to said things, but
Yes.
we won't maybe go into that. That's a
Apparently.
discussion for another day.
No, yeah.
But I think from a knowledge worker's perspective, there is real value to having your co-workers around you and having a vision and being able to see their body language. And the more that we can integrate emerging
Technology.
technologies to be able to make those telepresences more realistic, that digital kind of twin aspect of a person, I do think that there's value to that. I know it's expensive and not everyone is going to be able to achieve it, and therefore you do it on a scale, everything from Zoom all the way through to full fidelity digital twins of individuals. But there's going to be like a nice medium, I think, in between there, that we will have at a reasonable price point. Because let's face it, it's all going to come down to a cost point to be able to achieve it, and it's going to be looking at the benefits versus the cost. But that will just get cheaper and cheaper as technology
And
gets
will
cheaper.
develop
Yeah,
over time.
absolutely.
Yeah, and it reminds me of that TV show Silicon Valley, which is my favorite TV show ever. I don't know if you've seen that episode where Gavin Belson, who's the head of the one of the big tech companies that they're sort of imitating, and he buys this thing called the telehuman, and he's trying to have a holographic meeting with someone who's in the office, and he's out in Wyoming at Jackson Hole, and then the internet's not working, so the telehuman doesn't work, and then the Zoom call doesn't work, and even the phone doesn't work because they don't have broadband in rural Wyoming. So there's a lot to catch up. But talk to us about the third place I talk about a lot, which is places other than home or the office, which are so important in the distributed workplace nowadays, whether it be cafes, hotel lobbies, co-working spaces. And there's been a lot of talk about a metaverse like third place to replace both home and the headquarters. So explain for our listeners, some of us who are definitely not as tech savvy as you, firstly, what does this metaverse world actually mean, and what would that look like as a third place for the office if we created this metaverse world of work?
So there's lots of definitions of a metaverse, but I think a really good one is to think about gaming. So if you think about where people game, so let's take Fortnite or Valorant or a multiplayer game like Roblox as an example. They are what I would call early stage metaverses because the metaverse doesn't really exist yet. There is what we would call virtual worlds or virtual spaces or game environments that you can bring multi-user collaboration together in, but that idea of the true metaverse perhaps isn't really here yet. But what I would say is think about games and think about that as that third place. And what one does there is different to what one might do in the workplace or at home. And yes, a game is about entertainment, but a game is also about project management. It's about teamwork. It's about leadership. It's about having conversations. It's about meeting friends. It's about collaborating. So there's so many different aspects. And if you watch children these days, they essentially integrate themselves into almost a metaverse environment where they have Roblox operating alongside a YouTube video, alongside a
A
group chat
Discord
that
channel.
they're or uh, like a YouTube's sorry, like a Messenger Kids if they're
Hmm.
not at the age for Discord.
Hmm.
And so they are very savvy in
Savvy.
being
Yeah.
able to integrate all of those things together. And what's fascinating, especially if you've got like children with siblings, is that they will all be on the same platform together. They might be a room apart, but they're also having a conversation with 10 or 15 other people that are all within, a reasonably short geographical region, but
Hmm.
they also might have friends who are not in that geographical region that are all part of that community. And so I think one can look at children and say, that's kind of where we want to see a metaverse environment where we have the real world blending with the digital. Yes, they're doing it for entertainment in most instances or community building, so social building. But
Hmm.
I think that there is aspects of work, and I think what I was talking about, the way that I do engagement, I think that type of work lends itself brilliantly to metaverse environments. And therefore, you don't really even, well, probably don't need to be at the workplace to do that. You could be in
Exactly.
digital environments, or I like to do a lot of, where I go walking and I'll have conversations just in my AirPods as I'm walking along, walking the dog. So I'm
Hmm.
working, but I'm in the environment. So it's blending those things together. I think a lot of knowledge workers would love to be out walking the dog while doing their work and other things. But
Totally.
I think that's really important that
Hmm.
you don't have to do every aspect of work
Mm.
sitting at a traditional desk or pressing out the factory widgets. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important that you can have a hybrid nature. And something like a metaverse, that idea of, especially for the listeners who have children that do that, they
Hmm.
can hopefully get a vision of what they're doing in that communications aspect. But
Hmm.
if you start to add tools to that, which is essentially what Meta tried to do with Meta Horizon, but it was a bit of a flop, unfortunately, or what Teams tried to do with I think it was Microsoft Mesh, which again was a bit of a flop,
Hmm.
um, because what they haven't quite worked out yet is that intrinsic motivation of games and entertainment isn't really translating as well to that sort of extrinsic reward work environment. And I think that's
Hmm.
where gamification works and doesn't work, because no one's really solved, I think, those real issues of, well, work is kind of work and entertainment is entertainment and socializing is socializing. And how do we kind of make it all work together? And I think we're still a bit muddled around that aspect of things, which is why the metaverse, in a way, was kind of proposed, tried to be adopted by throwing money at it, and then didn't quite hit the mark yet. Because I
Mm.
think as a population, especially as a working population, we perhaps don't have whether it's the organizational models, whether it's the models of work in our own work environment of our own selves. And so I think
Hmm.
there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done from the human aspect, not from the technical aspect. Because I think from the technical aspect,
We're
We've got
there. We're
we're
there.
there. We're
Yep.
pretty much there, and it's only going to get better from a technical perspective. But I think we haven't looked at the organizational perspective, and we haven't looked at the individuals, what their work means in those types of environments. Now, some organizations will do it better than others,
Mm-hmm.
and some have probably started to transition a little bit, like you look at capability maturity models and other things from the software
Yep.
engineering industry. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
going to see a lot of organizations looking at that sort of technology maturity models and how their capability and work can sort of work alongside these emerging systems, be it AI, metaverses, virtual realities, gamification, etc. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of leaders don't have any understanding of the the technology. They just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it's very difficult to reflect with evidence because they don't have that evidence to say, well, how's that going to be beneficial to our organization? And in a way, I do a bit of mentoring for Advanced Queensland and for the Queensland government as part of their small business. And in a lot of cases, as a mentor, you have to be a little bit brutal in saying, well, unfortunately, I think the buck stops in a lot of ways with the leadership, and
Totally.
actually reimagining what your business is not about throwing money or putting robots in or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
It's actually about, unfortunately, turning over the leadership in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
because and in some cases they're very open to that. And it's not about replacing it with younger people. Age is not an issue. It's about trying to look at things differently. It's going in with a different mindset. They teach the kids about, that growth mindset. And I think that's why I'm really positive about where work and other things are heading towards, because I think there's a lot more of that happening in school, which
Mm-hmm.
perhaps wasn't there in our era or those older, where it was more of that factory mindset, more of you go to work, you push out the widgets, work is 9 to 5. It was rigid. It was within that. And I'm not an organizational behavior expert, but I'm sure that there's theories about what that is.
Oh,
um,
definitely.
but I think that youngsters don't want that at all. And they are showing that through their play, through their social engagement, that they see the world differently and they think about the world differently, and that the world needs to change. Otherwise, they won't engage in that world. They
They
will
won't.
look for new industries to
Mm-hmm.
engage with, because that's what they're wired for. It's what they're looking for. And that's going to be a big wake up call. And I think we're seeing it now where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
industry says, oh, these young people, they don't know how to work in the office. Well, maybe the office doesn't know how to work.
Exactly, James. And everything you said about the leadership, the mindset, the thinking, the technology is there. And the imperative, I think, is going to be one, the kids coming through, as you said, the Gen Alphas who just don't even think in the way that you and I might think. But secondly, the imperative is going to be our competitors and the companies who are already doing this really well. And this idea of this compelling experience and experience design. And so it has to get smarter. It has to get more immersive to compete with the worlds that they're occupying, whether it be the home environment, whether it be your favorite cafe in a city environment. So I wanted to ask you about then what this means for the workplace, because there are some companies that I've looked at in my research who do this incredibly well in terms of this experience design and this hospitality experience. And I remember going to Time Warner when they were building their offices at Hudson Yards a few years ago. And I think that was probably 2016 or 17. And they were building mixed reality offices then in those new buildings. But so what does mixed reality mean? So I'm sitting in the office, paint me a picture. What's that? And extended reality. So how could that prototype the sensory, the emotional experiences, whether it be acoustics, lighting, spatial feel, where I'm actually sitting, that are going to give employees both a compelling experience and also a more effective way to work?
So I think everyone knows about entertainment. It's a good one because everyone kind of engages in it. So if we think a little bit about how entertainment has changed in the home environment, and then let's kind of take that out from there. So, we looked at things like the movie cinema as the place to go to have that experience, to engage in, incredible sound and vision and larger than life visual spectacular. And then we started to then see larger scale televisions. We started to see 7.1 surround sound at home. We started to then see a dropping of the prices where now we have sound bars that can do Dolby Atmos, and we can have, fully fledged 100-inch plus televisions right next to our eyeballs, where we're literally able to have that sort of television experience. Or we can put a headset on and literally be in an IMAX theater. Now, whether that's comfortable or not, twos and fro's for different people. But
Sure.
we're starting to see that even in the home environment. Let's take another look. We look at things like theme parks. Now, theme parks are a really interesting one. Disney always said that they were never about being engineers or other things. They were Imagineers. They were always about thinking, how can technology, innovation, creativity work in a way that makes people come and want to come to the place, essentially the work environment, if you think about it. And they've obviously translated that to moving places like carnival ships, to lots of different things. Now, I think that is a really interesting mindset because they're always thinking about making the place a destination. We see it with really good restaurants. We see it with, great parks, great tourist attractions, that it's not just about the thing, it's about the whole experience that one develops around that thing. That's pre and post. Now, they used to use this idea of transmedia. It kind of died off a little bit, but it's sort of there, the idea that we have lots of different media forms, all sort of, essentially working together and layered across each other to be able to enhance and enrich the experience. So before one gets there, while one is there, and post being there, and that might be everything from, audio to vision to text to spatial experiences, to simply just chatting to your friends about the experience that you just had. So it's that whole enrichment process. So I think the technology is maturing to a point where in the entertainment world, they can see that. And it's because that's their business. So now we've got to then go, okay, so, and gaming, by the way, is very good at that as well, being able to create, highly enriched, immersive experiences that keep people engaged in flow state for a very long period of time. Now, so we
How do
know
we
that we
do
can
this in
do,
the
so we know we
office?
can do it. We
Yeah.
know we can do it when it relates to entertainment. So the question then becomes, how do we do it effectively? Because we've set up this idea that work's a bad thing. This is the
Works is
problem.
boring.
So
It's terrible.
work is the antithesis of me doing entertainment. And so I think there's so many factors that need to change. But if we just look at the technical kind of one first, and then we can sort of unpack the other one maybe at another point. But Gen Alphas, etc., have this idea already that we can work and play in the same spot because they do it. They do their homework while playing Roblox. So I think they're starting to get wired around this idea that I can be in these environments. So there is a bit of rewiring or affordance theory. So building people's affordances to be able to work there. So that's education and training. So there's a lot of education and training that has to be done. But if we look at some industries that are starting to integrate this, now I'm going to look at it from my industries, and you can talk a little bit from the industries that you've seen it. But we see, say, in the film industry, that they are now integrating, games technology for multiple blockbuster movies, and the terminology is called virtual production. Now, one can look at that and say it's essentially mixed reality. Now, why
Mm-hmm.
do I say it's mixed reality and what does it mean? So it's blending and utilizing the physical and virtual worlds in harmony with each other. So essentially, both the physical and virtual are required to work together in order to create the sum greater than the outcome being greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
So it uses digital screens, it uses lighting, it uses sound, it uses environments to reconstruct the sort of staging for actors and directors and other people to essentially pre-visualize or visualize what the movie is going to be
Mm-hmm.
live while
Mm-hmm.
they're doing the action. Now, it
Yeah.
came to sort of fruition with shows like The Mandalorian. So we're talking just sort of um, around that COVID time, just pre slash just post COVID.
Mm.
But that was sort of the beginnings of doing it. Now, why do they do it? Because it saved money. That was
Mm-hmm.
the reason they did it. So
Mm.
they didn't do it because it's whiz bang and all the rest of it. It actually saves money, and it saves money because it allows you to make more mistakes and to have conversations and to engage much earlier in the process than waiting until post-production, which is where most things got done, which is incredibly expensive to fix the issues once you've gone and shot the entire film.
Yeah.
Or in
Yeah.
software, it might have been, fixing everything in the testing phases. It's
Yeah.
madness. Or in the car industry, fixing it once you've already rolled the
Made
car
the
out the
car.
door. So we know about process optimization. We know about early defect detection. And so being able to do that within these technical environments makes totally economic sense.
Mm.
So they
Yeah.
do it by essentially using game engine. So it's essentially games.
Mm-hmm.
In the film industry, they use Epic Game Engine. In a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
games, they use Epic Game Engine.
Yeah.
And even Elon Musk is looking at Epic Game Engine for integration in cars to make the driving experience better. So look, I think that there's a lot of things where they're looking at this hybrid mixed reality is actually a positive thing. And what's really fascinating about that is because everything comes from that digital environment, you can integrate artificial intelligence, sensor technology.
Yeah.
You can like sample what the lighting is in the environment and then
Yes.
recreate it based off what's actually in the virtual space.
Mm-hmm.
You can dampen sound or elevate sound. You can isolate it across different microphones. The same thing with LED array, like lighting. So every LED little point can be programmed directly from within
Yeah.
these systems. So it's just about being able to directly manipulate the physical environment by what you see in the virtual. Then, as humans become augmented, i.e., we have sensor technology, wearable technology,
Mm-hmm.
that then can be fed into the systems to augment for the personalization, the
Yes.
individual, or perhaps across a cohort, a larger group.
Mm-hmm.
Be that it could be anything from temperature control to resetting mood. So imagine changing the lighting in your
Yes.
office place based off the collective mood
Mm-hmm.
of the environment,
Mm-hmm.
or even looking at research data and saying, okay, well, at this time of day, people's rhythms sort of go off a little bit, usually after lunch. So
Mm-hmm.
let's modify and change the environmental factors, which is not even that difficult by
No,
just
it's not.
changing some audio and lighting, which, as I
Circadian
said, they're
lighting.
already
Mm-hmm.
doing that now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they certainly do that a lot in immersive environments.
Yep.
Games do it brilliantly where
Mm-hmm.
you change the flow state. So you
Yeah.
can't have someone in a heightened stress state all the time.
No, you
You have to
can't.
move them through different states.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that logic can easily be applied to a work environment,
Yeah.
and that can be applied to somebody individually. Now, individuals more difficult than group based because you'd
Mm-hmm.
have to have kind of your own individual like pod kind of area,
Yep.
but that's
Which is
fine. I mean,
happening.
maybe
Furniture
we're going back to the
companies,
old
they are.
cubicle kind of
Furniture
concept.
companies
So
are
yeah,
bringing that back. And
yep,
I commented for an
yeah,
article this week that
yeah,
talked about they did a poll. Do you want to bring back the cubicle in the office? And I think 10,000 people responded, James, and 72% of them said yes, bring back the cubicle because
Well,
of
they
the
want
issue,
the cubicle because
visual and auditory privacy.
open plan is
Mhm.
mm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this is the frontier. I think this is so, so exciting. And if we look at it from the lens in my research that totally complements what you're saying, is that for someone to be effective, I think in any sphere of life or work, but especially at work, they have to be physically and psychologically comfortable.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to bring and express our own identity at work. We have to be able to personalize things. And so I do think that, as you were talking about, whether it's AI in the physical environment in terms of lighting, sound, all of the things that you talk about,
Sensing, yeah,
sensory,
biorhythmic type
yeah,
stuff. Yep.
and then but then within my own space, what can I personalize that's going to make me most effective psychologically and physically? And we have known for a long time, we haven't had the technology to do it, that the more that people can personalize their workspace, the more effective that is. So you talk about the home entertainment. I think that's such a brilliant example, as opposed to the movie theater. So I never go to the movies. Okay. And the
No,
reason
I think a
is
lot of people don't.
because it's
Yeah.
too sensorially
Mm,
overwhelming. I can't
mm.
control anything. I don't want to sit next to other people. Usually it's too loud for me. And I just don't enjoy it. I can have all of that technology. So I'm willing to trade the size of the screen, because the size of your TV at home is probably pretty adequate with the sound immersion. But I can control all those other aspects that are going to make me physically and psychologically comfortable.
Yep.
And so that's what we need in the workplace. And if you look at any comments in terms of articles about open plan or modern workplaces, it's noise, distraction. Like on that article last week, people were commenting, it was hilarious. I don't want to sit next to listening to this person breathe all day.
Yep. 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 To be
Whatever
honest,
the
it's very true.
irritation.
It's why
It's
people
very
sit in
true.
headphones all day
Right.
long in an open plan office.
Which then
And
reduces the whole point of us
well,
being
you
there
might
for
as well not even be
collaboration.
there. There's no
So
point even being there.
this
Yeah.
is the frontier.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this, James. And as you said, the technology's there. So, now it's the
Yes.
mindset and those other things. So
I think
let,
there's a lot to do in the mindset. I think,
Mhm.
the technology is definitely there, but the the models of how business works,
Yes.
that they are not there.
No,
They
they're not.
really aren't. And I think
Mhm.
there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done on the it's about understanding what is work. And I think we're going to have to do that really quick, because if we don't,
Yep.
then what I was saying about process optimizing workforces, we're going to
Mhm.
see that absolutely accelerate. And we don't want to see that
100%.
accelerate, but it will,
No, it
from
will.
the economics.
Yeah.
And so we rapidly have to work out what is work,
Yes.
and we need to have that conversation openly and effectively and honestly.
Yeah.
And people cannot come in with old models of what is work, because
Mhm.
that is something that might have worked in the 1940s in a factory, but it is not working now.
It's not
And it
working.
will never work with Gen Alphas ever.
It will
They
never work.
literally won't even do it. They will
No,
just say, be
I don't want to
buggered
be
with
in there.
work.
I don't,
Yep.
and that's what we're
Yep.
seeing already.
Yep.
Um, uh, could literally talk to you all day, James, but I want to end up on one question, which I think is a bit of fun and interesting as well, in that agentic AI space. Okay. So, and going back to gaming, all right, we talk about the non-playable characters. So for those of our listeners who aren't gamers, first of all, can you tell us what a non-playable character is? But then secondly, in the workplace, could we actually have NPCs as co-workers, and what kind of role would a digital agent or an NPC
Yep.
play in this modern reality?
So an NPC is a non-player character. So think of them as these might be other protagonists. They might move the story along. They might be an artificial intelligent bot that you're fighting against within the environment. Essentially, it's anyone or any thing that is not a human controlled
Character.
actor within
Mhm.
that particular scene. So we're seeing these kind of NPCs starting to emerge in concept in areas like education with AI tutors that can support people. We sort of see them in like the idea of bot-based systems, but I think they're done. I don't think they're done great. I mean, really, the last thing I want to be doing is talking to a bot. It just doesn't work for
No,
me.
no, me either.
Because they're not great NPCs. They're kind of like the worst ones.
Exactly. I
They're
want
the
to talk
ones that
to
you
you.
click through the
Mm,
dialogue because you don't
yeah,
want to read it, or they
yeah,
sound weird, so you just
yeah.
skip them and get to the better curated ones that are
Mm-hmm.
really good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we will move towards an environment where we ourselves will have our own digital twin that is very much made around our mindset. Now, this is going to take a little while, but I think it will eventually happen, and they will act like ourselves within environments. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to say all environments
Yeah,
because that's not the case, but
yeah.
they will do certain things and work on our behalf in certain activities that might be risky, that might be ones that we want to accelerate, that humans may not be fast enough to do it, but we still want that human uh, persona, that
Mm-hmm.
avatar of
Mm-hmm.
the human to
Mm.
participate in it.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest advantages with processing power in AI is the speed and the number of iterations that you can put something through. So
Mm.
imagine you're able to look at a problem from millions of different perspectives and be able to do that almost in probably not real time, but almost real time,
Mm.
using a mental model of the human to be able to essentially act on your behalf, kind of like the way you would do, but be able to do it across so many different iterations. Now, that to me is something really fascinating about myself as a digital avatar within that. Now imagine that you have programmable agents that agitate, that make you think, that
Mm.
push and poke and make you kind of a little bit uncomfortable about trying to solve the way that you're doing something. And these AI NPCs, or maybe they're like the office avatars, they're kind of there trying to take you out of the rut. So in artificial intelligence, we talk about local minima and global maxima, which the idea being that if you fall into a search space that is kind of a solution, but it's not the best solution, that we use algorithms to try to kind of agitate the environment so that it can get to a better solution. And so using that kind of concept where not settling for perhaps the first solution that is explored, but kind of agitating that space to see whether something better might come up, or something a bit more cost effective, or something that kind of better maps against the outcomes, using a hybrid of sort of AI agitators and human experts. I think that's a really interesting place. And I can guarantee it's happening now. I know companies that are doing this where they're literally using AI agents as thought provokers, as agitators to come to better solutions.
Mm.
We often thought about those people in the workplace as the annoying one. It's like, that's that one making us do more work. Because again, we come in with the wrong model of what is work. We're
Mm-hmm.
coming in with work is producing widgets.
Mm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
this is what has happened. And knowledge work should never be about widgets.
Widgets. No.
It can't be about widgets. And I think that's where the biggest mistakes have been made over the last 20, 30 years
Mm.
as we've transitioned into knowledge work, is that we've really just created digital widgets. And
Totally.
we've got to move away from that. And I think
Yeah.
that's where AI will thrive alongside of humans in being able to reimagine what work is. But if we maintain knowledge work as widgets, like the software engineering industry or the coding industry, then we are going to see essentially 90% of those people out of work.
Yeah. Amazing. I know everyone's going to take
I
so
don't want
much.
to end on, I don't want to end on a negative. I don't
No,
know.
but it's such
But,
there's so much to
yeah.
take out of everything you've said today, James. I'm going to link where everyone can find out more about you and your research. So thank you again so much for your time coming on the floor plan today.
You're more than welcome. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Cheers. Thank you.